The FAFO season is still in full swing, and this administration is making sure everyone feels the heat. Now, Pamela Trump supporters are losing their jobs, and farmers are realizing the hard way that Trump has broken his promises to them. Hello guys, and welcome back to our channel. If you're new here, then don't forget to subscribe, tap on the notification bell so that you don't have to miss on any of our interesting videos, and do make sure to tap on the like button if you enjoy our content. Now, of late, we have been seeing video after video of farmers on the brink of losing their farms because the government is reneging on contracts. Now, the EQIP program, which provides cost sharing for essential farm infrastructure like fences, water wells, and seedings, is funded by the Inflation Reduction Act. But thanks to executive orders, that funding is now frozen. In this video, one farmer, a Pamela man who voted Republican, recently lost his job of 20 years and is now regretting his decision. His story is not unique. Trump's order to freeze most federal grants and loans has created widespread panic and uncertainty in the agricultural sector, which relies heavily on government assistance for loans, disaster relief, and conservation practices. Now, this is not just a matter of partisan politics, it's about the livelihoods of farmers and their families. So with that said, let's take a look at these videos. I will be right back.
Well, for the first time ever, I regret voting Republican. Lost my job today. Was cut out by Doge. I'd had that job for 20 years. I was part of the Piper study. It's and we were so close to solving this, and now it's. I guess we will never know. It's I mean, we were studying the best way to pickle peppers and how many peppers can you get in a peck. We may never know. We just may never know now. It's I don't know what I'm gonna do.
I need your help to save my farm and many other farms. I wanted to give you guys an update on what we figured out with our contract through NRCS. So to give you some backstory, if you haven't watched the previous video, please go out, watch that previous video I've got on there. We are possibly going to lose our farm if NRCS doesn't hold up their contract with us on the EQIP program. So the reason that they're not able to hold up the contract is our EQIP program, which is cost sharing on fences, waters, a well, and some seedings, was funded by the Inflation Reduction Act. Because of the executive orders, there's a pause or a freeze on the funding through the Inflation Reduction Act, and they're not able to pay out on the stuff that we completed or anything going forward. But the issue I have is I've already done a bunch of the work, already paid for the material, already paid for the labor, so I'm out all that cost, and I use my farm operating expenses in order to do those projects, because per contract, I knew that I was going to get cost sharing refunds on the stuff once completed, but now that it's completed, they're saying that they're unable to provide the funds because of the freeze on the Inflation Reduction Act funds. So I reached out to a couple different senators and Congress people. So I reached out to Ann Wagner's office. I have not heard back from them. I reached out to Josh Hawley's office. I have heard back from him. Not from him personally, but from his office. And they are looking into it because they said that this should not be happening. The intention was not to take away the funding from the farmers, but doing the Inflation Reduction Act, cutting those costs, then it's also taken away from the programs that those programs helped out. So it's in the works, but what I need from you guys is if you could please share this, tag your representatives, tag your senators. I need to get some ground on this because I'm not the only one this is affecting. So there are other farmers in the comments saying that they're in the same boat that I'm in because they signed these contracts, and the contracts, so whenever I looked into the contract, I made sure that that funding was set aside. It wasn't funding that, oh, we hope it's there whenever it's done. I made sure that that funding was set aside so that way before I made these business decisions, I knew that funding was there per contract. So they're backing out on the contract because they don't have the funding. They can't release the funds. So please tag the representatives. Please tag the senators. I need to get some ground on this. We need to help me and other farmers out. We've got to get this funding paid out. I don't care if they don't do it in the future. The problem is there was contracts in place. Multiple farms made business decisions, and multiple farms are going to sink if we don't get traction on this and get those funds unfrozen.
Oh, McDonald. That's terrible. Wait, this you?
I did vote for Donald Trump.
Well, let's get into the real reason why Bob from VeggieTales here might lose his farm, because the government is literally just the consequences of his own fucking action. This man was receiving funding and aid through the NRCS, which in part was funded by the Inflation Reduction Act, a policy set in place by Joe Biden. Mind you, that's kind of crazy, because why are you living off of the government? Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Isn't that what y'all supposed to do? Now, because of executive orders signed by Trump, there is a pause on funds through the Inflation Reduction Act, and no money can go out. And since no funds can go out, he is in danger of losing his farm. Let me get this straight. Because of your inflated ignorance and your reduced education, look at your neighbor and say reduced education, you went to the polls, put all of your eggs in Trump's basket, and now you have concepts of chickens. Yikes on bikes. And it's like, y'all will do everything but admit that that man is a problem and that y'all fucked up. I might lose my farm because of the government. No, think about it. You're gonna lose your farm because of Trump. Because you voted for him. Because you fucked around and now you're finding out. Because now you're on your page talking about well, yes, I voted for Trump, but it's time for us to all come together. It's not me versus you, it's us versus them. Please help me save my farm. Call your local representatives. Share my video. Not the J-Lo level gaslight. I wish y'all had this energy on November 5th. That was the time that we were supposed to come together. That was the group project, and y'all didn't do your part. It's giving you want to study after the exam has already been taken. And let me hold your hand with a napkin in between. When I say this, I got a 92% on my exam. I'm not looking for no extra credit. Thoughts and prayers. Hope this helps. Peace and love. Talk to you later.
Did y'all see that farmer that voted for Trump that's now about to lose his farm because of Trump? Even though Kamala was the one who passed the bill to give him the money that he needed for his farm in the first place. Now he's on TikTok begging for us to help him keep his farm, and he gonna say, oh, it's not supposed to be an us versus us. It's supposed to be us versus them. Us. Then he gonna say, oh, it's corrupted on both sides of the aisle. It's all about money. So you thought the felon who was impeached was in the pockets of billionaires, had dozens of cases out against him. You thought he was the less corrupt option to go with over the woman who worked in all three branches of the government, spent her entire life being a civil servant, and passed the specific bill that gave you the loan that you needed for your farm, that the administration you voted for has just signed an executive order to undo. Oh, all I have for you, sir, are concepts of sympathy. I have concepts of thoughts and prayers. Do I have them actually? No. I won't be holding up the prayer line for you. Why would I do that? No, I'm not helping. No. And what's so funny is there's probably a bunch of farmers that voted for Trump that are now about to lose their farms because of him. Y'all thought he cared about y'all just because y'all share the same. He don't. Because not only do you have to be YT for him to actually give a fuck about you, you also have to be rich. That's the point y'all are missing. Y'all not rich. Y'all are working people. He's not for y'all.
Last night, I watched video after video of farmers who might lose their farms because the government is reneging on contracts they wrote with these farmers. Hi guys, my name's Will, your favorite rural campaign and elections expert, and let's talk about it. Now the problem is President Trump's order to freeze most federal grants and loans has created a panic and uncertainty within the agricultural sector, which relies on billions of dollars in direct government assistance for loans, disaster relief, and conservation practices, many of which have been around since the days of FDR, and farmers have begun to rely on them. Now, if you've watched the news at all, you know that a federal judge blocked the order on Tuesday. The problem is, and what the media isn't telling you, is that farmers and ranchers over the last week to 10 days have begun to receive letters telling them that the government may not be able to live up to the promises they made in these signed contracts with farmers and ranchers to improve conservation and increase productivity on the farm. Sadly, I watched one cattle farmer video last night in the state of Missouri where he said that he's going to fall $80,000 short in funding because the government promised him that if he and his family invested in good conservation practices, they would support his efforts with grants and loans. He received a letter in the past 10 days telling him that they couldn't keep their promise even though they have a signed contract. And as a direct result, he's going to fall $80,000 short on his spring loan payment. And the only option he has right now is to sell his cattle. And he needs those cattle because those cattle are going to have calves, and he needs those calves to pay his fall payment. It's a no-win situation, and it's not his fault. My friends, this is the problem with electing a president that knows nothing about agriculture and placing people at the Department of Agriculture whose only understanding of growing crops and raising livestock is what they learned in a YouTube video on the plane on their way to Washington, D.C. To give you an example of the size of the problem, farmers received more than $10.5 billion in direct government payments in 2024, nearly half of which came from conservation programs. And that figure doesn't include federal crop insurance, which accounted for over $19 billion just in 2022 alone. And the consequences not only impact a farmer's ability to pay his loans, they also run the risk of costing farmers the land itself. As an example, the federal government approved a $2.3 million low-interest federal loan to replace drainage tiles in Montgomery County, Illinois. The loan was part of a $307 million USDA grant program to modernize rural drinking water and wastewater infrastructure. And for those of you that didn't grow up on a farm, drainage tiles or pipes buried under farmland carry away excess water. Farmers began using them in the 1890s, and many of these tiles in Montgomery County, Illinois are collapsing, and that causes flooding. And flooding prevents farmers from planting their crops. Now, farmers are starting to understand the extent of Trump's lack of knowledge, and they're starting to speak out. One farmer was quoted as saying, Trump has no knowledge, zero knowledge of what's important relating to agriculture, especially agricultural drainage. Unless you think that the grant programs spelled out in the freeze are the only way the Trump administration is attacking small family farms and ranches, remember this. This is just one piece of the puzzle. Before attempting to freeze federal grants and loans, Trump signed an executive order suspending all Inflation Reduction Act funding, including the USDA's partnership for climate, smart commodities, and a program aimed at supporting sustainable farming practices. The Inflation Reduction Act is a cornerstone of former President Joe Biden's climate policy, and it allocated $400 billion in funding and tax credits to spur conservation and green energy efforts. And many people don't know that billions of those dollars went into agriculture. Now, I know it's easy for Americans who are not involved in agriculture to simply say, well, that's who they voted for, or FAFO. But I'm simply asking everyone to remember that 30% of farmers and ranchers did not vote for Donald Trump. And the consequences of our inability to raise the amount of food that we need to grow to feed our country and to grow the amount of livestock that we need to grow to feed our country and the world will be felt mostly by poor people, the elderly, and children more than anybody else. Now, I made a decision yesterday that from now on, when I do these videos, I'm going to end them with a call to action to tell people what they can do to make a difference. And here's your call for action. I'm asking everyone who watches this video and cares about food prices and the small family farm and ranch to call your elected officials, whether they're a Democrat or Republican, and tell them that the federal government needs to keep its word to small family farms and ranches. They need to provide the money that they promised they would provide for conservation efforts, improve farming, and increase productivity on the family farm. Farmers were counting on this when they signed the paper and spent the money that they spent. And don't let your politicians tell you that farmers aren't in danger. These letters have already gone out, and farmers have already been notified that they may not receive the funds that they were promised. And any politician that tells you otherwise is either sorely misinformed or they're lying to you.
Some farmers are finding out the hard way about voting for Trump. So let's make this very clear. This farmer voted for Trump Yet he was taking advantage of a program through the Inflation Reduction Act, which is a Biden policy. And now that Trump has come into office, he has frozen that, and he's might not get his funds even though he had a contract, meaning he put out a bunch of his own money thinking he was going to get paid back by the government. Now he probably isn't and could very likely lose his farm. Growing up, my family was like an agriculture adjacent business. My husband is a 4th generation farmer. My children want to be 5th generation farmers. It pains me to see this. Like, I will never rejoice at a farmer possibly losing their farm because I know what that means. Like, farming is not just a job, it is a way of life. Your whole life revolves around farming. Everything you do, every decision you make. Now, with that being said, I have empathy. I don't have sympathy. All the information that was available to me and every other farmer that voted blue was available to this person. Now, I get there's so much that goes into this. Like, you are ingrained when you live in a red rural area that Dems are evil and that red is the only way to go and that red is for farmers. And it's just not true. On my old account that got banned, I so many times shared the data with farmers that you netted more income under Biden than you did under Trump. That Trump decimated small farms with his tariffs his last term. And that if it wasn't for a bailout from taxpayers, there would have been even more small farms that went under. And every time they argued with me, they ignored the facts. They didn't want to hear it. And that stubbornness is getting you to where you are today. I wasn't even going to make a video about this actually until today when I saw his most recent video where he comes on and say, yeah, I did vote for Trump. I don't know why you guys are tearing me apart in the comments. Like, we don't need to be so nasty to each other. Why does it have to be us versus them, left versus right? Like, it's time to unify. Isn't it funny how all of a sudden Trumpers and MAGA want to unify when they're finding out that we were actually right about Trump? Up until then, we were all just, because you go look at his reposts and you can definitely tell he was not kind to the left. He was not unifying with the left until all of a sudden now when the FA is meeting the FO. So again, not celebrating this man could lose his farm, but hoping to all hope that you farmers wake up and realize that there is not one party that's always going to be the perfect party for farmers, that you need to look at what the policies are. You need to pay attention to what, not only what they are saying they're going to do, but what the evidence is showing. All the evidence is there that even though Donald Trump said he wasn't going to do Project 2025, it was obvious that's what he was going to do. And we told you until you were blue in the face, you have to be willing to listen. I hope you all learned.
Oh no. Who's to blame? I'm still waiting for you to say who's to blame. Whose executive order did this? It is weird how you never say who's to blame. But you know, considering the EQIP program was part of the Inflation Reduction Act, and that was brought to us by Biden, and now it's been halted by someone who said throughout the campaign that they wanted to terminate the IRA, I think it's important you say who did it, because there is one specific administration who's trying to do out of that money. And newsflash, it's not the last one. And while, of course, I don't know exactly who you voted for, the fact that you don't actually say who's to blame for this says a lot. And I don't want anyone to lose their livelihood. That's why we've tried to warn you over and over and over again that this is exactly what would happen. Oh, and it might surprise you to know that it's not that they don't have the money to pay you. They just don't want you to have it.
I think, like a lot of people, I'm concerned about and frankly afraid of what might happen on Super Bowl Sunday. The American population will be largely distracted, as will other people around the world. And during those times when we're a little bit distracted, things get moving in various negative ways. So what's going to happen in Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, we need to be vigilant. And what's going to happen here domestically in the United States with Musk and Trump. I really believe that Sunday is going to, in the shadows, things are going to happen. So be vigilant.
Now, despite assurances from the Trump administration that programs helping farmers would not be affected in the government overhaul, the impact has been immediate and wide-ranging, from cash assistance for ranchers to fix kettle watering systems to help for corn growers wanting to plant cover crops that curb wind erosion. Now, some of the money that has been frozen is tied to environmental conservation programs that were funded by former President Joe Biden's signature climate law, the 2022 Inflation Reduction Act, which included about $19.5 billion for farm programs over 10 years. Now, the White House said its January 27 proposal to freeze federal loans and grants would not affect programs for farmers. The administration rescinded its proposal and it has been temporarily blocked in court. The White House did not respond to a request for comment on Friday. Now, USDA is withholding funds from farmers for conservation programs despite the White House stating last week that funds to individuals would not be frozen. Contractors for conservation programs also have been affected by a funding freeze. The Lower Soybean Association, for instance, cited in a letter to lawmakers that $11 million owed to farmers is at risk. Farmers are learning their conservation payments are frozen because those contracts were funded through the Inflation Reduction Act. Two federal judges over the past week have ruled that the Trump administration did not have authority to block funding that was appropriated by Congress. DTN repeatedly sought comment from USDA over which programs are frozen and questioned why payments to individual farmers were frozen. Now, USDA's press office did not respond. Officials with the Natural Resources Conservation Service also did not respond. At least one Missouri producer posted videos on TikTok worried he could lose his farm because USDA reneged on his cost share contract with NRCs under the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, EQIP. Now, over the past 2 days, Skylar Holden, a 27-year-old first-generation cattle producer in eastern Missouri, has posted multiple videos detailing how he signed a contract with NRCS. Now, he signed a contract with NRCS for $240,000 and now has $80,000 in material purchased and signed contract to install water lines. Now, Holden said he was told the contract was frozen and nobody knows when the money could be released. In an interview with DTN, Holden expressed frustration because he was initially cautious about signing up for a government program. Once he got started, however, he said he was excited about the prospects and what the EQIP improvements could do on his land. He touted NRCS programs on his TikTok account. "I made business decisions based on this contract," he said. Now, Holden said NRCS staff told him to contact his congressional delegation in Missouri to see if they could get the funds released. He added, "Going into this, if I had known they could have frozen the payments, I never would have done it. I was promoting the NRCS programs a lot on my TikTok, and I talked to a lot of people who signed up for those programs. And now looking back, I feel guilty because they're all in the same boat I'm in. They started projects and they aren't getting paid out on them. I don't understand how you can sign a contract and just renege on that contract. If something doesn't change, we're going to lose this farm and I'm extremely stressed about it," he added. Now, the distinction with Holden's EQIP project is that the funds NRCS is using for his contract are supposed to come from the 2022 Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA. Now, the Trump administration put a freeze on all federal spending related to the IRA. Other reports have cited that renewable energy grants at EPA and the Department of Energy have been halted to communities around the country. There are reports of federal agencies now trying to claw back IRA dollars and contracts. Now, USDA received $19.5 billion for conservation programs in the IRA for climate smart practices that support soil health, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, or sequester carbon in the soil. Now, that funding has been part of the tug and pull in the Farm Bill debate. EQIP under the law was supposed to have $8.45 billion. The law included $4.9 billion for the Regional Conservation Partnership Program, grants for public-private partnership for large-scale conservation projects. Now, another $3.5 billion went to the Conservation Stewardship Program, CSP. An easement program got $1.5 billion and NRCS got $1 billion for technical assistance. Now, USDA under the Biden administration moved to sign as many contracts as they could with producers to get the funds out of the door. A cost share essentially pays back the farmer after the contracted work is done, often in phases. Now, contractors for another conservation pilot program, the $3.1 billion Partnership for Climate Smart Commodities, are facing frozen funds as well. USDA issued 135 contracts to collections of groups, companies, and universities to enroll farmers in climate-smart conservation practices with the goal that those farmers would then eventually be able to market their commodities at a premium based on the practices they were using on their farms. Now, the program involves 102 different farm commodities, and those contracts were funded through the Commodity Credit Corp, a fund controlled by the Secretary of Agriculture. Some of the grants under the pilot project paid farmers upfront for enrolling and then were reimbursed through USDA. Others provided technical assistance to farmers and then would be reimbursed. Now, those contracts are also being told their funds are frozen with no clarification from USDA on how to proceed. Some of those groups, which include state and national commodity organizations, are concerned USDA may now choose not to reimburse them for their costs. Now, Reuters reported the president of the Lower Soybean Association, Brent Swart, wrote a letter this week to the lower congressional delegation, all Republicans expressing concerns about the freeze. And this suspension puts the program and its participating farmers at risk. Now, Swart's letter to lawmakers stated, he added that farmers are contractually owed $11 million for practices implemented in 2024. Politico also reported USDA is withholding funds for a pair of organic programs, the Organic Market Development Grant Program and the Transition to Organic Partnership Program. Now, every Democrat on the Senate Agriculture Committee joined Ranking Member Amy to send a letter to USDA Acting Secretary Gary Washington. The senators are requesting information on actions the department has taken to pause payments or terminate obligations, as well as the legal basis for pausing or terminating any funding that has been appropriated by Congress. Now, the senators stated that over the past week, farmers, ranchers, schools, and state governments have contacted our offices in search of clarity on programs, websites, offices, and activities impacted by these orders. Now, conflicting information from the administration has added to the uncertainty, costing those who depend on the department time and money. The farmers, rural families, and businesses that depend on the department need certainty to plan ahead for this growing season. We have finally come to the end of the video, but before I go, I just want to ask the same question that one of the ladies asked in the videos. Once again, who is to blame for this again? Share your thoughts, your views, your contributions in the comment section. Thank you for always watching and see you in our next video.